Welcome to the Southbound Podcast. I am your host, Patrick Reed with Blue Water Civil Design. Our guest today is James Chavez and Jamie Frost from the South Carolina Power Team. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, man, good to be here.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank y'all for coming up from Columbia today to be here on the show. Tell us just a little bit about the South Carolina Power Team.
I'll start. We're created as a nonprofit in 1988 by the 20 electric cooperatives of South Carolina to focus on helping grow our state and bring jobs and capital investment to electric cooperative territory. So my predecessor was hired as the first CEO in 1988. I came on board in 2013. Our team basically took a marketing organization and turned it into a business development organization.
Wow.
That's what we were charged to do.
Yeah.
At the time, we were building a nuclear facility that didn't happen. I think most everybody knows that.
Santee Cooper.
But we started winning deals because of a strategy that we adopted and resources we were given. And even when that nuclear plant went away, they still realized that economic development is good for our system.
Mm-hmm.
So we've invested to date more than $50 million in advancing sites across our territory, which is something that JB will expound on quite a bit. And then putting significant resources into getting deals done, getting new companies in our territory, and also helping existing members grow.
Yeah, wow. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Jamie, when did you join the Power Team?
I came on board at the end or beginning of 2017, January 2017.
Wow.
And, originally came on board to really head up the strategic initiative of our Site Readiness Fund program.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Well, let's go back a little bit and talk about how you guys got to the South Carolina Power Team, because it's probably a little bit fresh for some of our listeners to hear and learn about it. But at the same time, this is something that's amazing for our state. James, tell us, where did you grow up? Are you from South Carolina?
No, sir. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Lived there until I was 22. I've moved around some, but I was getting ready to go get a master's degree, and an old roommate was living in Colorado, mountains of Colorado. He's like, "Hey, man, why don't you come ski for a year?" So the only professional job I could find in town was running the Chamber of Commerce. And I was the worst skier of the three people they interviewed. So I got the job and ended up in Colorado and kind of fell in love with chamber work, eventually moved to Atlanta and continued working in Chamber of Commerce world.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up doing economic development work. I originally started doing small business, entrepreneur development, and also working with family enterprise. But eventually kind of worked my way into economic development. Did 6 years in the Atlanta market, another 6 years down in Tifton, Georgia, running a Chamber of Commerce and Development Authority. And then in 2004, had the opportunity to move to Clarksville, Tennessee, which is outside of the Nashville region. Was there about 10 years and then had an opportunity to come here.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
That's so a lot of that kind of like, by chance you moved to Colorado, need a job, end up getting chamber, like the work, and then kind of follow it around. That's pretty fascinating. Jamie, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get to the Power Team, and what's a little bit of your story?
Yeah, I mean, my story started, I was born in downtown Columbia, South Carolina. My parents were IRMO kids. I was raised from, newborn up through my high school, career, in IRMO.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really kind of all I knew. I worked as a young child with my dad and my granddad, and learned a lot from them. But, one of the things that I was told early on was to go get a college career, and for what that means now, it is what it is. But I did. That's where I ended up. I went to the University of South Carolina after graduating IRMO in 1993, and went on to be, a civil engineer.
Yeah.
I graduated the University of South Carolina in the engineering school in 1997, and then went on to my first career job at Viro Group. It was an environmental firm. I quickly got kind of pushed into the mix of being an on-site project engineer in Minnesota. So shortly after I started my career, I left the small town of IRMO, which is what I knew, and kind of what back then I considered the small city of Columbia went into, an area that I was not familiar with, but acted as, the eyes and ears for my company back in that time.
Yeah.
Shortly after that, I went on to work for Stevens & Wilkinson and, was able to do more site civil type engineering and kind of work through the ranks. Ultimately, moved on about 4 years later and went to S&ME, learned a little bit about geotechnical, some subsurface engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And, it wasn't too long after that I was brought on to Alliance Consulting Engineers, where ultimately I became a partner in a civil engineering firm, which was one of my goals at the onset, was to, truly own my own business, be a partner in my own business, and help guide and direct that. I felt like I accomplished that goal. An opportunity arose at the South Carolina Power Team and jumped on it, began discussions with James, and, I feel very fortunate and blessed to be where I am today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think one of the things that, we kind of discovered when we were talking about y'all's upbringing, that y'all have a very similar upbringing with working with your fathers
Sure.
in the summer. Y'all want to share?
Our dads were rough on us.
You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Jamie talked a little bit about working with his dad, but growing up, there was no option but to have a job. I think the story I shared with y'all was, I think I was 7th, 8th grade and Air Jordans were coming out and I was wearing Kmart shoes. My dad's like, look, if you want them, go get them. Get a job. You can buy whatever you want. So I started selling newspapers downtown. That's back when newspapers were published twice a day.
Yeah.
So I had this little satchel front and back that had, I don't know, probably 50 papers in the front, 50 in the back. And every day I had a route in our downtown area that I went and sold papers in office buildings. But I was able to save money and buy my own stuff. And there's a tremendous amount of freedom in being able to make your own money and make your own decisions on how you want to spend it. My dad wouldn't agree, and looking back, I wouldn't agree with how I spent my money. But I always worked. And I will tell you that when I graduated from college and I got a job, there's a bunch of my fraternity brothers that never had to work and they couldn't find a job.
Mm-hmm.
So, for whatever I resented my parents for making me work so hard, that's why I am where I am today,
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, that's right. Thank
Absolutely.
you for sharing that. Yeah.
Instilling that work ethic, I think, is a big deal. And I think that's some of the same things that, James and I have in common is, my granddad, my dad's father had his own business. My dad, he worked for multiple construction companies, HVAC, primarily HVAC companies through his career, but he always had his own business on the side. I mean, there's downturns in the construction world and, ups and downs. And when those times occurred, he had his own business. And, one of the things that I learned from him very on was he needed help.
Yeah.
And so, he brought me on board, at the age of 8, 9, 10, however old I was, he would look to me to, go grab that wrench, go,
hold the flashlight.
Hold the flashlight, crawl in a small space that he might not be able to crawl into.
Yeah.
Do whatever it took to, help and get the job done. And you really didn't ask questions. If they told you to do it, you did it.
Right.
And so, I learned very early on that work ethic, even in the house. I had chores growing up inside the home, but, I think learned a lot from my dad watching him work and his career path. But learned a lot from that along the way too, which we'll talk about.
Knowing what he does, and you could always do that, but there's a bigger world out there,
right,
of opportunity,
right.
That kind of led you into engineering, I think, and
absolutely.
I'll tell you, for me, it was I wasn't happy about it. I would have rather been playing football with my friends in the street,
right?
But my dad owned a bunch of houses that he rented out. And so anytime there's an issue with the tenant, rather than hiring a firm to go handle that for you, he had us. And so he'd have, he'd have us up on a rooftop. I know how many times we've had to climb ladders in our lives to carry stuff up to our dads, working on a roof or, whatever it was. But, man, I did not like that.
Yeah.
I could have been doing other stuff with my friends.
Right.
But again, if not for that,
build a foundation for you to have something to lean back on.
Now that my son is grown, he's 21, my daughter's 24, but, I made every attempt to kind of treat him the same way. If you want something, go get a job. You're old enough to get a job, go do it. And now that he's earning his own money, he's actually investing his own money, which I never did.
Oh, wow.
He's way smarter than me. But he gets it. There's so much freedom that comes with being able to make your own money and not have to ask mom and dad for it.
Right. And thank y'all for sharing that, because we've had some guests talk about earning their own money and also how their fathers and parents raise them, and understanding the value of earning wages and putting that forward. You guys seem to you guys do work really well together. You have an engineer background, and yours is more of kind of a networking
early childhood.
Well, that's where it all started. and both of your fathers were welders too, right?
Yeah.
And that was something that we kind of put together.
It's one thing I wish I would have learned a little bit more about. I was typically the one, getting the welding flash because I was holding the pieces of metal together, and Dad would say, "Hey, look away." But inevitably, he's striking, right whenever I'm like trying to look away or shut my eyes.
So they tell you that it would blind you if you look at it?
I mean, yeah, they definitely
It'll blind
said,
you for a minute.
Definitely said, don't look at it. But
I remember the arc welder, my brother be holding a joint, two joints together.
Yeah.
And he's like, you have the helmets on. He's like, all right, put your thing down. So as soon as my dad was going to weld, I'd take my brother's and flip it up so that he got the flash and I didn't.
He's holding it and he can't flip it down.
But it's funny, like when we walk into an industry now, especially if they have a bunch of welders in fabrication, that smell like takes me back to my dad's garage where
no doubt.
And you're talking to him on a different level.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's a ton of fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not exactly where you come from, but it's how you want to live your life and do all that. That's
how you were raised.
That's right. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing all that. Do you guys work really well together? How is this? So, again, Jamie comes from the engineering background. You're Chamber of Commerce, people networking. Kind of how does that kind of play off with you two working together when y'all are talking to somebody? You get one person thinking one way and another person thinking a different way. How does that kind of work for the dynamic of you two?
Allow me to speak for both of us. Saying it's all good.
Yeah.
I think we both think very similar in terms of all our team thinks very similarly in terms of we understand our mission, we understand who we serve, we understand our job at the end of the day. We have a strategy that dictates what we're supposed to be doing. It's not a lot to fight about.
Right.
So, and now we're going through this process called Entrepreneur Operating System where we take our strategy and put it in basically bite-sized chunks. We're not trying to eat the elephant all at once. And everybody's got a role. And we all have accountabilities. So it makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
It makes life a lot easier. I tell you, I'm a very high level, big picture. I'm not good at task stuff. And one of the things that people can rely on is that if there's something due, if I hadn't gotten it to him, they're going to go see Jamie and Jamie's going to track me down.
Yeah.
And make sure I get it done.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, just to tag on to that, I think, the idea thinking that James brings to the table, and when we're meeting with a prospect or we're meeting with a broker or we're meeting with a site selector or any other consultant or engineers, contractors, bringing those big ideas to the table and having that creativity is James's strong point. I'm a kind of an in the weeds kind of a guy. I kind of like that task oriented, okay, here's the ideas. Here's some thoughts behind those ideas. How do we get them done? And that methodical thinking is what I bring to the table.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Having the big ideas down to the methodical, let's figure out how to
potential trouble.
Get it done.
He helps keep us out of trouble.
There you go. That's right.
Creates a pathway to get there.
Yeah.
It's been, we're friends outside of work. But and I think probably both our spouses were concerned about what life would be like when we're working together. And it's, I love him. I love my entire team. We've got a respect for each other that is not I don't think it's a boss, it's not an up-down relationship.
Right.
So everybody does what everybody has to do to get the job done.
Yeah.
And we're super blessed, not just by his presence, but by if you look at everybody on our team right now, you could sit down and have this conversation with them about we know our strategy, we know our mission. Everybody owns it. We've been given tremendous resources to work with from the cooperatives. We just go out and get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Well, let's take a quick break and then we'll come right back.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
The Southbound Podcast is sponsored by Blue Water Civil Design. Blue Water Civil Design is a professional civil engineering firm located in Greenville, South Carolina, serving the southeastern United States and beyond. Started in 2010, the firm is bound together by 4 founding professional engineers with more than 100 years combined experience in all aspects of civil site work engineering, land planning, site selection, and analysis. For more information, please visit us at bluewatercivil.com. Welcome back to the Southbound Podcast. I am Patrick Reed, your host. Today we have the South Carolina Power Team guys here with us today. Thank you guys for joining us. Let's take a dive back to where we were right before you guys joined the South Carolina Power Team. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing and that kind of segueing into working at the Power Team.
So I was in Tennessee, and if I can, we were talking about some of the things that really have influenced our strategy and where we are, especially serving a lot of rural and second-tier communities. So before Tennessee, I was in Tifton, Georgia, and I spent 7 years trying to get our leadership to understand that we can't keep trying to sell the same 25 acres we have left in our industrial park. We need product.
Right.
They wouldn't do it. So I get a call from a headhunter that I originally told I wasn't interested. Every time I get a call from a headhunter, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
And then they circle back. But what Clarksville, Tennessee had done was the community had committed $30 million, $15 million from the county, $50 million from the city to jointly develop a new industrial park. Also, they were trying to develop a mega site. I can spend the rest of my career selling from an empty wagon, or I can go someplace where there's a real chance of success. Community leadership's on the same page. They're committed to the same cause. So that was something that was a huge differentiator for me. In fact, I still have friends that are in South Georgia, and I would tell them, come up here, fly up here, bring your leadership up here. We'll host you, but come see what this community has done and the success that they're seeing. I mean, they bought that property in 2000. I moved there in 2004. Took another 3 years to get it developed out. But once it was developed out, it's been off to the races.
Wow.
Huge tire plant, R&D facility, distribution center. Amazon, I think, has just announced something there. LG is there.
Wow.
But if it wasn't for the product, that stuff all goes someplace else.
Right.
Sure.
So coming here, one of the things that I talked about in my interview was the fact that we have, when we in the 60s, when we adopted territory, we didn't fight for anything. We didn't fight for Charleston, Greenville, Spartanburg. That was all taken by IOUs, Duke, now Dominion, these other folks. We took everything that was rural. Well, now Fort Mill is not rural.
Yeah, that's right.
Greater Spartanburg County is not rural, but that's all our territory. And so in order for us to be ready for growth, we have to have product. And that's where the pitch for this Site Readiness Fund came about. We can't just be in the business of certifying sites. We need sites that are ready.
That's right.
Otherwise, these projects go somewhere else. And so we made some initial investments on fruit, but it wasn't until Jamie got there that really we were able to focus on having fully developed, master planned, all resources in place, sites that we could, once our dollars were in, we're off.
Wow. Yeah.
This greater Spartanburg area, Connexial is a fully developed $12, $13, $14 million park with a lot of different partners, but he played a key role in that, along with the cooperative, who's actually the landowner.
Wow.
Sure.
So it's making a difference across the state, and we're seeing a lot of wins, but without product, you're out. Yeah. Especially in today's environment.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, a lot of what's going on in South Carolina, and particularly the South, is a lot of stuff's getting up and we're getting less and less inventory. So
especially now with COVID, If it's not ready, you're out.
Yeah.
So these spec buildings are getting gobbled up.
Things are moving so quick.
There's no time
today.
to wait for you to bring gas and water and sewer to a site. It's got to be there.
Right. Already. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing, James.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie, what all were you doing right before? I mean, I know that you're at Alliance, but kind of leading up to, how does your all the way up until that point has been a culmination of being the site readiness guy?
Yeah, I mean, I think back, early in my career, just, if you go back to the Vira Group days, my first job straight out of college, and being able to sit in Minnesota on a landfill, me being the only eyes and ears of Vira Group, at the table during that construction site as a project engineer, I mean, I learned a lot. I mean, I had to sit in meetings and talk to folks that were 20 years older than me, and hold my own and gain respect. And I think at the end of the day, it led me through my career on into Stevens and Wilkinson and there being able to work strategically on some of the military bases that, protect our country. And I would sit across the table from generals and have to explain, the civil engineering concept. And, that's a scary situation from time to time, but all of those scary situations help you grow.
Yeah.
And ultimately, as I said, I wanted to be a business owner at one point. My granddad was, my father was, I wanted to dabble in that and I wanted to understand that. And that opportunity came, to me through Alliance Consulting Engineers. And I joined Alliance Consulting Engineers in 2004. In 2011, I became partner. I was partner for 5 years. And with that, I learned kind of that economic development role that, how do I play in the economic development community? I attribute that a lot to Alliance Consulting Engineers, because that's the arena that we played in mostly.
Yeah.
But as I went through the process of Alliance Consulting Engineers and learning more about economic development, I was able to work with the South Carolina Power Team even before James came on board. But in 2014, with that change in direction, the South Carolina Power Team, to me, in my eyes, was more on the map. There was a strategic plan in place to do more for the communities that the electric cooperatives serve. And I think with just about any cooperative, organization, the 20 cooperatives, the electric cooperatives, the South Carolina Power Team, Central Electric Power Cooperative, you join that family. It's a family that, as an employee, you don't typically leave. So from 1988, when South Carolina Power Team was formed, till 2013, 2014, when Ralph Thomas retired, James came on. There were other folks retiring shortly after James came on board. It turned into opportunity.
Yeah.
And Rusty Reed was retiring. He was, the guy in my position before I came on board. And as that was progressing, I thought, man, what another potential great opportunity for me. So, and to be able to utilize my success, my engineering knowledge, bring something to the table with the Site Readiness Fund program, understanding, truly the title of where I am now, the Senior Vice President of Community Preparedness. It's not only getting sites ready, which is a very key component of economic development, but it is truly getting the community ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
The communities that the electric co-ops serve is very important. If they're not ready, then that prospect coming in, that site consultant coming in, it's going to be easy to cut you.
Yeah, I want to come. Oh, go ahead.
Can I touch on something real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to tie back to why it was so important to get Jamie on board, and Rebecca now.
Absolutely.
So when I was in Atlanta, the Atlanta market, I basically was a chauffeur. So a prospect would come in, get the RFI stuff done, but then I was showing them other people's property. The negotiation of the deal was all left to those folks.
Right.
When I moved to South Georgia, you're alone, right? You're not showing somebody else's property. You're showing what you got.
The property.
Yeah. And so, Georgia Power at that time, and they're still a benchmark. TVA, when I was in Tennessee, they have teams that do engineering and consulting. And for a small community like mine, to have an asset like that I didn't have to pay for was a big deal. So when Jamie expressed interest in the job, I was like, okay. So now not only do we have somebody who knows their stuff with how we're going to disseminate these funds with site readiness funds, I have somebody who can be a consultant. And now we have two somebodies who can be in consultant to communities. We can do renderings. We can do a lot of things that an engineering firm would do on the front end.
Right.
But it doesn't cost the community anything. Or if we can't do it, he knows where to go get it.
Yeah.
Whether it's you all, whether it's another company out there, we know where we can go get it and get it done quickly.
Yeah.
So that there's an entire suite of services that he and Rebecca bring to the table beyond handling our site readiness fund that are a huge asset to our communities and to our cooperatives.
Right.
I would just say I think that adds some comfort.
Yeah.
Some comfort level to the prospect or the site consultant that's looking within our territory to have somebody that they can bounce something off of. You know, we're not here to replace an engineering firm. You know, we're not signing and sealing plans at South Carolina Power Team. No. But one thing we can do is we can look at a proposal from an engineering firm, look at a proposal from a due diligence proposal, and we can assess that and guide our prospect and our lead into the right direction on how to proceed from there.
And you can read the plans and help negotiate and understand.
Now, what I do want to say is that I've mentioned Georgia Power and I've mentioned TVA, and I consider the people that work there still part of my family. But we didn't go about replicating what they did.
Right.
We've tried to do what they did better.
That's great.
Doing stuff in a more innovative way. I would tell you the Site Readiness Fund, nobody's putting that kind of money into projects.
Right.
There's no utility across the U.S. that is putting that kind of money into projects, but we had to. And now maybe we don't have to as much, but we're seeing a lot of success from it.
Yeah.
So our co-ops want to keep doing it.
Yeah. So let's take a step back real quick. SC Power Team, the membership from all the co-ops, kind of how that kind of comes together to then create the Site Readiness Fund. Tell us a little bit about how that kind of the genesis of that and how it kind of moves through and where
the co-ops working together predates our existence. So when they jointly created a transmission company that rather than you as a distributor having to own transmission, the 20 own the transmission system across the state.
Yeah.
They do joint buying and purchasing. So we're the largest customer of Santee Cooper. We're the largest customer of Duke in the Carolinas. We're Duke's third largest customer overall.
Wow.
But we take those rates, we buy from generation, we distribute it across the state evenly. But what they do with us is they all participate in our operating budget. All 20 participate in any deal that we do in anybody's backyard, whether it's site readiness investment or whether it's a new industry coming in or an industry expansion. Everybody pays in. But when it's paid back, any of the proceeds that remain go back to the 20. So
everyone benefits.
Yeah. So
whether it's in your
whether
backyard,
you're large or small, you pay something in based on how big you are and how much power you use.
Yeah.
Then the benefits, the proceeds go back to the 20. And so that helps keep costs down for members across the state. So if you're in Horry County, who doesn't see a lot of industrial activity, if you're in Hilton Head, they don't see a lot of industrial type activity, they still see huge benefit from the work that we do as a collective because of how they've set this whole thing up.
Yeah. Awesome.
And as far as I know, I think we're the only co-op system in the country that works that way.
Wow. That's fantastic. Right here in South Carolina. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Jamie, do you want to tell us a little, I know you were touching on the Site Readiness Fund. Tell us a little bit more about kind of the things that you've done. Maybe if you want to share a success story in there somewhere.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, as James mentioned, in 2014, the new strategy was unveiled to our board of trustees. You know, our board was, for lack of another word, they were on board immediately. And they said, hit the ground running. I think they essentially asked James, hey, are you willing to put your job on the line for us to put these kind of monies up?
Yeah, they didn't basically ask. They did ask.
They asked you, are you willing to put your line or your job on the line? To if we put these monies up, you gotta show success. And James was like, absolutely. You give me something to sell from, we're gonna win, and we did. But I mean, overall, the Site Readiness Fund, it originally started as a $30 million fund over 6 years. It was originally from 2014 to 2018, $6 million a year over 5 years. And it came with matching dollar requirements. And we quickly found out, before we hit the end of the deadline at 2018 that we were running out of money. I mean, there was so many communities, so many, sites to invest in that we quickly, ran out of money. So, and
we had a couple of big investments that we made outside of the norm.
That's right. Some big investments that, are seeing wins now. I mean, Camp Hall, those kind of projects are seeing, we're reaping dividends from those now. But in 2018, we were, we came up to the point that we needed to go back to our board and ask for an additional $6 million really to get us through 2018.
Right.
We had essentially gone through the first $30 million in 4 years versus 5 years.
Wow.
Our board was on board immediately and said, absolutely, let's do it. We then had a strategy after that, a 3-year strategy, took us through the end of this year. Will take us through the end of 2021 to add another $18 million, another $6 million a year for those 3 years. So essentially, we were sitting at $54 million that could be put on the table. And that has leveraged another, $200 plus million at this stage. We are probably sitting somewhere around $260 to $270 million that has been implemented in sites, industrial parks, and industrial buildings throughout the state and electric co-op territories. That's led to 17 wins throughout our cooperative network.
Wow.
So we have success stories, and it's thriving. It's doing well. Each year we have more and more interest in it. So we're very proud of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you guys for sharing. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back.
Sure.
Thank you. Welcome back to the Southbound Podcast. I am Patrick Reed, your host. Today we have the South Carolina Power Team here with us in the studio. They've just recently kind of shared a little bit of some of the successes that they've had, but I'd be very interested to hear a particular success that you guys would like to share with our listeners.
Sure. Patrick, again, I think we mentioned through the Site Readiness Fund having 17 wins. And that's over about 34 grants that we've done, but the batting average is high. Those wins, have culminated on sites that we've put, millions of dollars in. I mean, not a ton of $1 million, but maybe $3 million in, down to a couple $100. And so, I can think of wins down from, putting a little bit of effort into, refurbishing a spec building, making it look nice for a prospect when they show up. Sumter County wins the deal, into, say, Newberry County, where, if not for some of the product development initiatives through the Site Readiness Fund, Samsung, coming to Newberry might not have had an opportunity. Right. So, James, maybe you mentioned a little bit about Samsung.
That's true. When we were negotiating the Samsung deal, they had to move fast. They were trying to beat LG into the market to build washing machines in the U.S. So that search basically got down to existing buildings, one in Newberry, where Caterpillar was shuttering their plant there, and one in Alabama. And the facility in Newberry worked well, but for them to grow, there was an existing manufacturer that kind of laid in the path of their growth. And when we were in Korea trying to close the deal, they came back and said, look, if you can move this industry, we're coming to South Carolina.
Wow.
And so I began negotiations with the industry, just basically getting a point of contact and starting to discuss initial numbers and would they be willing to move. But eventually the numbers got high enough that I really felt like it was not my deal to negotiate. That was Department of Commerce. And we put dollars into it. We put dollars into relocating their equipment. If we didn't have that spec building in Newberry, which they were able to move into and continue producing, they had no motivation to leave. And Samsung ends up in Birmingham, or not Birmingham, but in Alabama.
Yeah.
So it's, it's one of those things where there are a lot of pieces of a puzzle that have to come together. You never really think that relocating an existing industry is going to be one of those things, but we had product available to go. And that also, for that particular park, created a sense of freedom. And so now you have, I think, 3 different industries that are in there, if not 4. 3 industries, one's expanded price.
Right.
Which is quintessential for what we've said, economic development, which is, it's not just one thing, it's multiple things,
yeah, for sure.
multiple jobs, multiple growth. And I just want to,
sure.
that just emphasis of that one deal is magnified, not just getting Samsung a big international name, what else comes with it.
Right.
But it's not too long in our history that we did those deals.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of players that have ended up in other parts of the state that co-ops had an opportunity for, but our pricing wasn't right, or we didn't have product ready, or incentives right.
Yeah.
Well, in 2014, they made a steadfast commitment that we are going to compete. We're going to go toe-to-toe with Duke. We're going to go toe-to-toe with Georgia Power. And now, we're beating those guys.
Yeah.
It's not on every deal. Everybody's getting their share of wins.
Right.
But I think if Duke was sitting here now, they would tell you that their opportunity for growth in South Carolina largely resides with the co-ops. We're working together.
Yeah.
We're not trying to beat each other up on deals. We're working together to build a stronger proposal rather than trying to kick the crud out of each other.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way. Our system's come a long way. And those deals do not happen without, again, that cooperative commitment.
Yeah. And I would just say, the one thing that I would add to that, again, as it relates to success stories with the Site Readiness Fund in general is, if not for that spec building at Mid-Carolina Commerce Park in Newberry, that particular industry, SWM, would not be able to move. But, that spec building sat for several years and was the only thing in that industrial park. And prior to that was only roadway, water, and wastewater infrastructure. And we, whenever I was at Alliance Consulting Engineers, we took numerous prospects into that industrial park. And every one of them would look at the trees and say, I can't figure out how my industry would work here. And I don't want to be the first one in the park, whatever the case may be. Newberry County wanted to do a site readiness fund to clear, grub, and grade essentially 30 acres in the park. We clear, grubbed, and graded, 30 acres, did a 25-acre building pad, and the very next prospect that came in looking at the spec building that was still available in Mid-Carolina Commerce Park, noticed the construction of the pad going on right across the street from the spec building.
Ooh. And the cleared trees to the interstate.
Cleared trees to the interstate. They could actually see. It was a German company. It's Technics now landed there. They decided they weren't really interested in the spec building. They were more interested in the clear, grubbed, and graded pad where they could build the building of their dreams and what they could see and what they could envision there.
So the site readiness fund just pays for all that to kind of well suit it, and then they look over here and go over there and say, wow.
And I still today believe, with Technics having already announced in that park, really being the first, industry within the park, it probably gave SWM a little bit of comfort too, that this park is developing. We can move from the original industrial park we're in into this new spec building, make that our own, and still be successful. And it's, James mentioned, there's 3, 4, I think actually 4 now industries within that industrial park that, if not for the Site Readiness Fund, it could still be sitting vacant, or if not for Samsung. So
that is
success breeds more success.
That's right. Thank y'all so much for sharing that. That's beautiful to hear, and glad that things are going well and we continue to have success. On that note, I would like to kind of refocus back to some of your own personal successes and what you would consider to be your keys to being successful in your life and in your professional career.
Sure.
James, would you like to start?
Well, I haven't read what you wrote for me, but I would say that it's the 101. It's I had a mentor when I first accidentally got into economic development, and she's like, return a phone call. When they send you an RFI, make sure it gets out by the due date, if not beforehand.
Yeah.
Make sure it's complete. When you have a prospect visit, only have the people in the room that need to be there to answer questions that are being asked that day. Little things. It's doing the little things really, really well.
Right.
I've made an entire career of it. I think from a strategy standpoint, I think having 20 electric cooperatives and their leadership have ownership of our vision and our strategy. And it's not James's strategy. It's not Jamie's strategy. It's something that they own, has been invaluable to our success. Communities who are successful in doing that it's not name a local economic developer. It should never be their idea. Their job is to help their leadership think they thought of it.
Right.
Educate them, put the information in front of them, get them in front of folks that have been there and done that. So these become their ideas. It's way more powerful, right? If they write the strategy, they will underwrite the strategy. And that's played out for us in a huge way.
Wow, that's awesome. I like what you said there. If they write the strategy, then they're going to underwrite.
They're not my words. They're stolen words from somebody else. I don't know who it was.
It's true. I mean, it's absolutely
it's
true.
It's one of the absolutes in the world that we live in. If they write it, they'll underwrite it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jamie.
I think for me, it still all kind of goes back to my upbringing. I learned at an early age, follow through with what you say you're going to do and actually do what you say you're going to do. I mean, I think, some of the things that my granddad having his own business, my dad, having his own business, I learned from them, hearing some of the conversations that they would have with folks that they were working for, their clients at that time of, you said you were going to be here Monday, you didn't get here until Tuesday or Wednesday, and them having to explain that. Nobody wants to have to sit there and explain why you didn't do something.
Right.
So for me, it's just a key point for me is to, if I tell you I'm going to do something, then first I've already thought that definitely I can do it. I'm committed to it. And no matter what it takes, just do it. Yeah. Get it done. I mean, there's always that follow through. I mean, and you might not always hit the mark every time, but it's communication as well. If you know for sure that you're not going to be able to, follow through or do something on the exact day, time you said you were going to do it, communicate with who you're talking to, communicate with your prospect, your client. You make sure they understand, well, here's what I'm up against. Here's why I told you I'd get it done today. I'm not going to get it done. It'll be tomorrow, whatever the case is. But it's constant communication. It's being responsive. And at the end of the day, doing what you said you were going to do. Yeah,
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
There's kind of just I want to add one more that just came to mind, but just as a local economic developer, you're typically in the front of a deal and you get a lot of accolades, quotes in the paper, up on stage.
Yeah.
But for those that realize that there are a lot of people that help deliver on the promises you're making to industries. Mm-hmm. And every opportunity you get to thank them and publicly acknowledge them, it's your codes folks, it's your fire folk, it's everybody who's got a role to play in getting a deal up and running, your water and sewer team, gas team, making sure that those folks get thanked. We have 2,000 employees across our state that are delivering on promises that we're making between us and the cooperative to industry. Any chance we get to get in front of them and say thank you, we're all over it.
Wow. Yeah, that's so good.
Because they're the ones that are making things happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you guys go all across the state. Y'all doing a good bit of traveling here and there, visiting. So there's a lot of, windshield time, conferences, meetings. How have you guys over the years found balance in your home life and your work life? Because it's tough.
Yeah.
So you want to share some advice for that?
You want to start?
Yeah. I mean, I would say for me, it reverts back to kind of the do what you say what you do. Yeah. For me, it's, I think with anything that I do, I try to be present in the moment at the time I'm doing it. Yeah. I could be sitting here talking to you, Patrick, and I could, when I'm off camera or if I'm not talking, I could be looking at my phone, doing other things.
Right.
But, if I'm sitting across the table from a prospect, I'm listening to them. I'm actively engaging with them, and I want them to feel like, man, Jamie is the best listener ever. Yeah. So whenever I'm at home, I do the same thing. I actively try to engage with my wife, my kids, and I think that's key. I mean, so there's always times, at home, work comes into play. Mm-hmm. We live in this economic development world where, a project could come from China at any given time of day. Typically it'd be in the middle of the night or late nights, 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night,
Right.
which is in the morning for them. You just wrapped up with dinner, but you need a conference call. We need some site information. But it's, taking the time for your kids, taking the time for your family, stepping aside, actively engaging back in your work if you need to, but then, again, whatever it takes to put a child down to bed, give them a bath. I think it's just spreading the love and really trying to actively engage and listen to each and every person when you have their undivided attention.
Yeah.
My philosophy as an employer, and I think I have better ownership of it, is that if he is not good to everybody else, well, one, if he's not good to himself, taking care of himself, he can't be good to the other people in his life. That includes us.
True.
Yeah.
So I want him to take care of himself physically, spiritually, mentally. I want him to be able to go and be with his family, if it's during the day, whatever it is, to be able to be present. We talked about being present. I will tell you, I think I talk a lot about it, but I was probably the worst at it until last year during COVID. And for the first time in a long time, I think I really focused on taking care of me.
Yeah.
I had the best review I've had probably my entire career. We had a great year.
Yeah.
Closer to my team now than I think ever. All of us are. But you got to take care of yourself.
Right.
If you're not taking care of number one, you're not good for anybody else.
Yeah, the analogy I always kind of use, I'm not sure if I shared this with you guys or not, but when you're on an airplane, they always tell you the pre-flight instructions. Put the oxygen mask on you before you help your child out. And that's kind of goes against your parental instincts.
Sure.
Like, you got to take care of your children first. But ultimately, if you can't breathe, how can you
can't help
anyone else? Yeah, right. So I think that's very well said.
We were talking earlier, decision between golf and time with the family.
Right.
Time with the family. Being on the other side of that now, I'm so grateful for every soccer practice I complained about having to go to, for every thing I gave up to go do a game, or my daughter's dance competitions. When it's behind you, man, that's the thing you long for.
Yeah.
So don't miss a moment with your kiddos. Don't miss a moment with family.
Right.
This other stuff is going to be here. You got an entire career ahead of you. It's going to be there.
Yeah.
Unless it's mission critical, I want him to be with his family.
I like that.
Yeah.
Mission critical. All right. Well, guys, thank y'all so much for sharing that. Let's kind of wrap this up and let's look at the outlook. How does South Carolina Power Team look at the future of the South, the growth, the potential? What's y'all's projections?
I'd say from where I sit or where we sit, the South is hot. South Carolina is perceived as a very pro-business state. We're going to continue to see opportunity. The good part for us is city centers are grown out. So the next phase of development is coming out to what was rural, and that's co-op territory.
Yeah.
So we're getting opportunities we never had in the past, and it's a matter of being prepared for it. Biggest challenge to our success, frankly, is going to be having a talent pipeline of folks that are going to come in and be willing to take these jobs, want to take these jobs.
Right.
And so that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
Related to workforce issues. I mean, you guys are seeing it, the work you do.
That's right.
That, having people to do the jobs, to execute. It's not a shortage of work. We have a guy, Andrew Folks, who does existing industry for us, was just telling our board, there is no shortage of work for our employers. There's a shortage of staff and the shortage of materials. Other than that, that's the only thing holding them back.
Wow.
So the opportunity for South Carolina is huge.
Yeah.
It's a matter of us being able to feed people into the pipeline. But every state has that. Almost every state across the country is facing that same challenge. Right. It's a matter of who's going to do it better.
That's a good point.
And I would say for me, I'm excited. Number one, just, some of the events that we've been able to attend this year, through the COVID pandemic. I mean, we're hearing economists, which I'm sure y'all all are, but I'm hearing economists talk about, no downturn until 2030, 2031. I mean, a decade away from now, so, I mean, to me, that's exciting. My question is, can we sustain it? Number one, from a workforce, number two, from a supply chain, from, pricing of materials, construction materials, so I'm excited about, the future of where the cooperatives can grow and where we can be in the next year to 10. But another key component to that, is the continuation of our strategy. And James can touch on this a little bit more as well. But, we mentioned, from 2014 to 2018, a 5-year strategy. We then added a 3-year adder to that strategy that took us through 2021. Well, we just finished our 2-year adder to that to get us for a full 10-year strategy, which added some new initiatives and some cool new things that we're going to be able to do, things that you'll hear about in the future. But our board is completely excited about it. Development of workforce being one key component of that. It's amazing to hear, the cooperatives, their understanding that there is a need for workforce and how do we get there. But
and we have to play a role.
Got to play a role in developing that.
They're concerned that if they look back 10 years from now, are they going to question, did we do enough?
Yeah.
To hear your board of trustees talk about stuff that we're talking about every day, and it's not all about megawatts.
Yeah.
It's about the legacy that we're leaving our kids, their kids.
Right.
What are what opportunities are going to be presented for their grandchildren? When your board starts talking in that way,
that's
good stuff.
That's exciting. All right, last question, and this is just for our listeners, real quick. One little piece of advice for our listeners. Just, give them something to chew on, something to think about, something to write down. What's one little thing that you would give them to do, to think, to practice?
I'd say if they're in South Carolina, be grateful. We are so blessed with the environment that we get to work in. I can't think of anybody that I've talked to in the last 2 years that doesn't have enough work, that doesn't have a pipeline full of opportunity. Any of the utilities, contractors, engineering firms, man, we are immensely blessed. So just remind ourselves that we're in a blessed time, in a blessed state.
Yeah. I like what you said. There's work out there. It's just we need to fill in the supply and the workers for that. So that's a very well said message. Thank you, James.
For me, it would be, I hear James say this at least once a month. But wake up every Monday and be excited to do what you do.
Yeah.
If it doesn't excite you, find something that does, because, there's opportunity out there. So I know James obviously wakes up every Monday morning or Sunday evening. He's like, man, I can't wait to wake up Monday to get to work.
I am.
I love it. I mean,
that's awesome.
The
Monday motivation.
The things that we do to help, generations to come. If we can't be excited about that, I don't know how else you can get excited. But to me, that's what it's all about.
Monday is as good as Friday.
Be
That's
purposeful.
right, yeah.
Be purposeful in your work. Again, do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
Don't be the person that, nobody wants to call because they've heard the lip service too many times of, I'm going to get you that, or I'm going to do that for you, or, I'm going to put you in contact with this person. But then there's never a follow through.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I am very grateful to have you guys on the South.
We appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I really appreciate y'all's message, your stories of success that you've shared, the South Carolina Power Team and what you guys are doing for our co-ops, for our state, for our communities. You guys are inspiration and influencing the South, which is the Southbound Podcast.
Sure.
Well, thank you guys.
Well played.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Appreciate it, Patrick.
Yep.
Thank you.